It came in at 7:42 a.m. The group chat buzzed like it always did, half muted, half ignored. I was brushing my teeth when I glanced at the notification, not expecting anything but maybe a half-hearted HBD or a forwarded meme. Instead, there it was. "No one's coming to your party, grow up." From my mother. In the family group chat. I read it once. Then again. The second time was just to confirm the punctuation. No emojis, no love you, no irony. Just a single deliberate sentence tossed into a digital room full of people I used to try to matter to. I spat the toothpaste rinsed and walked to the living room. The air was still. I sat down, unlocked my phone, and replied with one word. Understood. Then I opened my banking app. The rent payment was already queued $3,000 like clockwork. It wasn't my rent. It was theirs. My parents' monthly lease for a 3-bedroom ranch in Arvada with a leaky roof and a fireplace no one ever lit. I'd been paying it for 4 years. I canceled the auto transfer. My heart didn't race. My fingers didn't shake. It felt like clicking unsubscribe on an old email newsletter you never signed up for but kept receiving anyway. Then I archived the group chat. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was clean. The kind of clean that comes when something is removed from your life, not added. I sat there for a while watching the blinking cursor on my screen, waiting for the next message that didn't come. No just kidding, no follow-up. Just digital silence. I got up and made coffee. Black, no sugar. The bitterness felt honest. I sat at the table and sipped slowly, watching sunlight creep across the floor, warm and indifferent. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. But something inside me shifted like a lock turning for the first time in years. Something that had been stuck now moved with purpose. I looked at the calendar on the fridge. A red circle marked today, Elena's 28th, in my own handwriting. I took the magnet off and threw it in the trash, then opened my laptop and logged into the car tracker account. The next morning, I drove to Arvada just after sunrise. Their street was still quiet, the kind of quiet that blankets a place before people start pretending everything's fine again. I didn't knock. I didn't even park. I pulled up to the curb, pressed the unlock button on my phone, and watched the sedan's lights blink twice. The same car I'd bought 2 years ago when Dad said his back couldn't handle the bus anymore. It was still clean. Of course it was. Kaya had it detailed monthly on my card. I stepped out, opened the driver's side door, and slid in. There was a gym bag in the back, some old receipts in the console, and a half-used air freshener hanging from the mirror. I didn't touch any of it. I just started the engine and drove off. No one came out to stop me. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel anything, really. Just a calm sort of closure, like finishing a chapter of a book that stopped making sense a long time ago. Back home, I called the credit card company. I told them I wanted to close every card authorized under my name. When they asked for a reason, I said, "No longer safe." That was all. Then I took a long shower, the kind where you stand there without thinking. No music, no timeline. Just water and steam, and the slow peeling away of a version of myself I didn't owe them anymore. By noon, I'd shredded 2 expired cards and packed the car keys in a drawer I didn't open often. The group chat was still silent. No new messages, no missed calls. That night, I pulled out a folder I hadn't opened in months, labeled Kaya Proof. I was 24 when it started. Just got promoted to full-time at the healthcare software company. It wasn't glamorous, but the paycheck cleared every 2 weeks and came with decent benefits. I remember telling them on a Sunday call, feeling proud. They didn't say congratulations. Mom just sighed and said, "That's a blessing, especially now that things are tight over here." It began with one rent payment, just this month. Your dad's hours got cut again. Then it was groceries. Your sister needs real food, not ramen. Then the electric bill. Your mom's back acts up when it gets cold. By year 2, I was covering the rent, gas, phone bills, the cat's vet visits, Kaya's car insurance, and anything they described as urgent. They never demanded. They just implied. "You're the stable one now. We gave you everything. It's your turn." Kaya didn't work much. She said she was building a wellness brand. Mostly, she posted filtered yoga poses on Instagram and went on spontaneous weekend trips. I never saw anyone in the photos but her and a rotating cast of boyfriends. One of those boyfriends crashed the old Corolla. That's when I bought the newer car. Registered under my name, monthly payments on my card. She picked the color midnight blue. She took selfies in it constantly. One caption read, "So grateful for those who believe in me. You know who you are." She didn't tag me. Mom would text me after. Wasn't that post sweet? She really does appreciate you even if she's not good with words. I nodded and said I was glad. But it didn't feel like appreciation. It felt like obligation disguised as flattery. Every month I told myself I'd pull back. I'd stop one bill. I'd say no to just one thing. But the moment I hesitated, the guilt came in waves. We're your family, Elena. You think strangers would ever do this for you? And every time I gave in. I told myself I was being kind, that this is what good daughters do. But sitting there now, holding the folder of receipts and bank transfers, I saw it clearly. They never saw any of it as kindness. They treated it like restitution, like I owed them for being born. I flipped the folder shut and placed it next to my laptop. On the screen, a notification popped up. Kaya had posted another story. I tapped it open. She was poolside again. The caption said, "Healing requires space." I drove 5 hours that Thanksgiving morning with a pie in the passenger seat and a bottle of Pinot tucked under my jacket. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. I thought it'd be a good surprise. Maybe a little awkward at first, but warm eventually. Maybe they'd even be happy. I knocked with my elbow holding the pie. The door creaked open and Mom blinked at me like I was the mailman. "Oh," she said. "You came." She called over her shoulder, "Kaya, tell Josh to hide the gifts, your sister's here." I didn't ask what gifts. I already knew they weren't mine. Inside, everything felt too lived in, too settled, like a party I'd wandered into by mistake. Josh emerged from what used to be my room wearing socks I recognized. No one offered to move him. That night, I slept on the couch under a fleece blanket that smelled faintly like old Febreze and disappointment. At dinner, Don raised his glass. Let's hear it for the woman who pays the bills but can't hold down a boyfriend. Laughter rippled across the table like it was a harmless joke, like I hadn't driven for hours to be there, like my presence was a performance they never asked for but still expected. Kaya snorted fork halfway to her mouth. Even Josh laughed. He didn't even know me. I smiled faintly and drank my wine. Then I got up, cleared the plates, washed the dishes. When the sink backed up, I took out my wallet and called a plumber. He came in the middle of dessert. Afterward, no one thanked me. Mom patted my shoulder and said, "Next year, just tell us first." Okay? We had plans. On the drive back, I didn't play music. I didn't call anyone. I watched the road stretch into dark silence and realized I felt lighter driving away than I ever had arriving. A week later, a coworker leaned over my desk and said, "Hey, wasn't that your sister I saw on Explore? Looked like a fun cabin trip." I opened Instagram and there they were. Mom, Don, Kaya, and Josh, all in matching beanies holding mugs by a fireplace. I zoomed in on Kaya's mug. It said, "Best daughter ever." It started with a notification buzz while I was working remotely from my apartment. I figured someone had sent a birthday meme or maybe a forwarded coupon code standard group chat noise. But when I opened the app, the entire thread was lit up. Dad had posted a screenshot of my Amazon birthday wish list. A few pairs of socks, some shampoo, I liked a pack of pens. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. Just small things I never remembered to buy for myself. "Look at this grown woman asking for socks and lotion," he wrote. "Guess we didn't raise her tough enough." Then came the clown emoji. Then a meme of a girl with a party hat and the caption, "Guess who's turning 12 again?" Kaya reacted with a laughing emoji and followed up with bet. She expects us to gift wrap it too. No one defended me. Not Mom, not my aunt, not the cousin who once cried when I helped her pay for her nursing exams. Just reaction emojis and punchlines like I was the group's entertainment. I didn't respond. I didn't leave the chat. I just started screenshotting. Not because I planned to get even, not because I needed revenge, just because for the first time I needed to see the whole picture without emotion. I wanted to know I wasn't imagining it, that the cruelty was real and not just my own sensitivity echoing back at me. That night, I saved the screenshots into a new folder. labeled it plainly receipts. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew I didn't want to forget. The next morning, Kaya posted a story, another poolside photo, a matcha in her hand, captioned, "Surround yourself with people who uplift you." I looked at the pool tiles in the background. It was a hotel I knew. I'd paid for her weekend there last month when she said she needed time to reset her energy. My phone buzzed again. A new message in the group chat. "Mom power's about to get shut off again. Not sure what we're supposed to do." I didn't answer. I just opened my credit monitoring app and refreshed the screen. The first red flag came from an email. "Your monthly loan balance is now available." I didn't recognize the lender. I hadn't taken out a loan, at least not one I remembered. I clicked the link, logged in with my social, and there it was. $8,400 opened in my name, with Dawn listed as the co-borrower. The application date was from last spring, around the time they said their roof needed repairs. I remembered getting a cryptic message from Mom, then pray for clear skies. "We can't afford another storm." I never thought to ask what she meant. The next day, I pulled my credit report. That's when I saw the Target card. Opened 2 years ago. My name, my credit, my address. Not mine. When I confronted her, Mom replied with a dismissive text. "You weren't even using it. Stop being dramatic." That word again, dramatic. It followed me like a shadow. The same week, a coworker named Julian mentioned Kaya in the break room. He said he ran into her at a gallery opening. She said, "You're like on the spectrum or something I didn't know." But it makes sense. "You're super quiet." I just nodded, smiled like it didn't sting. Then I went back to my desk and opened another folder. This one I named Backup, for real. I started collecting everything. Screenshots, emails, payment records, texts, voice messages, and Instagram captions where Kaya flaunted things I'd paid for. I found the voicemail Mom left me the day Kaya's tuition was due, screaming through tears. "She'll end up like you if we don't get her out of here. Is that what you want?" It didn't matter that I wasn't on the spectrum. What mattered was how convenient it was for them to say I was. How easy it made everything else make sense, the silence, the distance, the fact that I never fought back. But I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't being graceful. I was just vanishing slowly and politely from my own life while they lived comfortably on the borrowed credit of my quiet compliance. So I started pressing record. Every call, every voicemail. Not to make a scene, just to have proof in case the world ever asked why I finally stopped showing up. That proof would become my map out. 3 weeks passed with nothing but silence. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, Kaya texted Mom, says, "Come by tonight. Family dinner. We want to clear the air." I stared at the message for a while. It didn't feel like an apology. It felt like a summons. I said yes. That evening, I pulled into the driveway at 6:59 p.m. In my bag, a laptop, a backup drive, and a folder labeled in permanent marker truth. I didn't wear anything special. Just clean jeans and a sweater. I wasn't there to perform. I was yen for the day of LZ. I was there to finish something. They greeted me like nothing had happened. Mom kissed my cheek. Dad handed me a beer. Kaya grinned like she'd already won. The table was set with mismatched plates and overcooked pasta. The chairs still wobbled from years of ignoring the screws I offered to fix. They talked first. About forgiveness. About moving forward. About how my recent distance had hurt them. Then Mom said it like a nail tapping glass. "You're still part of this family, but you've made mistakes too." I took a slow breath, reached into my bag, and opened the laptop. No one stopped me. The first clip was Mom's voicemail, the one where she shouted at me to pay Kaya's tuition before she ends up like you. The second was Kaya's voice laughing on speaker. "She always pays. Makes her feel useful." Then the screenshots, rent payments, DMs, bank transfers, group chats. I slid the screen toward them and leaned back. They didn't speak, just stared. Mom blinked fast. Dad reached for his beer but missed. Kaya's jaw clenched, but she didn't say a word. I opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, loan statements, the Target card notice, and at the top, a single page with my credit report circled in red. When I spoke, it was quiet. You don't get to ask for peace when you've only ever offered control. I reached for the USB stick and walked to the living room, their smart TV powered on with a chime. The screen lit up with the loan application Don's name as primary, mine as co-signer. I let them stare at it in silence. You used my social without asking, I said, eyes on my father. You put me on the hook for your debt. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. It's already reported. They've frozen the account. You'll get the fraud notice next week. Mom's breath caught. Kaya let out a dry laugh. You're so dramatic. What's next? You going to sue us? I smiled, then walked back to the door. No, I said, but he might. I pulled it open and Jake stepped in. Kaya froze. Her smirk dropped like a switch had flipped. He held a black folder in one hand and didn't look at her. He sat across from her and set it on the table. You want to tell them, he said, or should I? Kaya stood up. Why are you here? Jake opened the folder. Inside were printed screenshots of messages, edited timestamps, mismatched fonts. Beneath them, a transcript of voice memos Kaya had spliced to make it sound like he'd screamed at her. The metadata showed the audio file had been created on her laptop, not his phone. At the bottom was a handwritten plan in her looping cursive titled, How to Emotionally Destabilize Him Before the Breakup. Mom covered her mouth. Don didn't move. Jake's voice stayed level. You told everyone I hurt you. You told Elena I was dangerous. You said I stalked you. Kaya snapped. You don't get to. You're not the victim Jake cut in. You're the villain. And I'm done pretending. He stood and walked to the door without waiting for a reply. I followed him, then turned back once more. You wanted me to be the good daughter, I said, the quiet wallet. But I'm done playing the part. I grabbed my bag and laptop and stepped out into the night. Behind me, I heard the shouting start, Margot calling Kaya's name. Dawn, demanding I come back, something heavy crashing against the wall. I didn't look back. Instead, I drove home in silence and woke the next morning to a blinking cursor and a folder labeled Archive. That night, I stayed up at my desk staring at the folder I had named Archive. It held everything: screenshots, voice notes, loan documents, bank records, Kaya's captions, Mom's voicemails. Nothing dramatic, just the facts no one had ever asked for. At 1:12 a.m., I uploaded it. The post read, When family treats you like an ATM with a heartbeat. No begging, no anger. Just a link to the evidence and one closing sentence, I'm not angry. I'm not sad. I'm just done pretending this is what love looks like. By morning it had spread. Not celebrity viral, but enough to catch. Hundreds of shares, dozens of comments, some from strangers, some from people who knew them. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I'd already said everything. Dad went live from the garage by noon. Said I was fragile. She doesn't know what she's doing. Behind him, a pyramid of empty beer cans. He called it forgiveness. I posted a reply. No caption, just a video of him from 3 years ago laughing. It's fine. I used her social. She owes us. I closed the app and walked to the window. Denver looked quiet from 10 floors up. 3 weeks later, I moved into a condo on the 10th floor downtown Denver. No rent, no roommates. Fully paid through a legal trust, no forwarding address, no name on the buzzer. Just clean floors, high ceilings, and silence I didn't have to earn. No one knew where I lived, not even close friends. I didn't post about it. I didn't text pictures of the view. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. The phone calls stopped. Eventually, even the cryptic posts and guilt-laced emails faded. I didn't block them, I just stopped listening. I built a new website that week. Black and white, minimal. Just a name, understood consulting. Quiet, steady. A space for people like me, those who grew up thinking love was something to buy back month after month. I didn't launch with a big announcement. No press. Just a simple line on the homepage. You don't owe anyone access to your peace. I worked, I slept, I healed, I didn't celebrate my birthday. But I bought a candle and lit it that night. Not for the year ahead, but for the years I survived without lighting anything at all. 3 weeks later, I screwed the plaque into the wall above my desk. Brushed steel clean font. No decoration, just words I now lived by. We don't rebuild what broke you. We build what frees you. Beneath it, a smaller plate. Matte black. Just 6 words. Guess who's not turning 12 again? I stepped back, took a breath, and smiled. Not because they'd seen it, but because they never would. This year there was no cake, no call, no chaos. Just a quiet office, a locked door, and finally a life that belonged only to me. For as long as I can remember, the Alden family cruise had been less about sailing and more about spectacle. Each summer, my parents chartered a luxury yacht and paraded us through the Caribbean like royalty. Every cocktail hour a stage for business triumphs and social conquests. To them, the sea wasn't freedom. It was a mirror in which they could admire themselves. This year, I wasn't even invited. The message came on a Tuesday morning, a vibration on my phone that I expected to be routine. Instead, I saw my mother's name and her careful words. This year's cruise is for successful families only. You'll understand? I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. After years of enduring their subtle jabs and backhanded praise, this was no misunderstanding. It was a dismissal, deliberate and final. I could almost hear my mother's voice in the phrasing, gentle enough to sound civil, sharp enough to wound. She hadn't even bothered to call. The Aldens never raised their voices. Cruelty was always laced in velvet. My hands trembled as I set the phone on my desk. Around me, the office hummed with the steady rhythm of maritime luxuries, phones ringing, printers humming, crew schedules being finalized for the summer season. Outside the glass wall, the harbor glittered with sunlight bouncing off the masts of yachts waiting in their slips. And there it was, the irony. The very family that branded me unworthy had booked a charter without knowing the vessel they would soon boast about belonged to me, my fleet, my company, my life's work. The sting of rejection burned deep, but beneath it something older stirred an ache that had lived in me since childhood, begging not just to be seen, but to be believed. It was the beginning of a reckoning I had postponed for years, and now I could no longer avoid it. I grew up in a Beacon Hill brownstone, its brick facade polished like a badge of pedigree. Inside, every room was curated for effect antique portraits, silk draperies, the kind of rugs you weren't allowed to walk on without removing your shoes. It looked like a home in every magazine spread my mother admired, but to me it always felt like a showroom, a place staged to impress rather than to live. At the dinner table, my family spoke the language of markets. My father dissected mergers and interest rates, while my brother, even as a teenager, parroted investment strategies he barely understood. My mother would sit poised, lips painted in her signature red, nodding at the numbers as if they were proof of our worth. There was never space for dreams or feelings, only metrics. Income defines worth. My father repeated so often it became scripture. His voice was always calm, his tailored suits immaculate, his approval measured in slight nods rather than affection. When I came home with perfect grades, he would glance at my report card, offer the smallest smile, and then ask how I planned to do better next semester. I tried to earn warmth where there was none. I memorized Latin roots, solved equations, and lined my desk with trophies, thinking perhaps one more award would tilt his head a little longer, that maybe he would say he was proud. He never did. My mother was no different. Her love came in corrections. Sit straighter. Walk lighter. Never let your voice shake in public. Even then, I felt something hollow growing inside me, a space where affection should have been. My achievements stacked higher each year, but instead of filling the gap, they only deepened it. By the time I reached adulthood, I understood that success in my family was not a source of love, only a ticket to remain in their orbit. And when I chose to step away from their orbit years later, I knew I would pay the price. By the time I graduated, there was never really a choice. My father had already lined up interviews at finance firms in Boston, and I stepped into that world with the same obedience that had carried me through school. The office gleamed with glass and steel, every corner humming with ambition. At first, I thought if I worked hard enough, I might finally belong not just in the firm, but in my family's definition of success. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. The competition was relentless, each colleague a rival disguised as a teammate. Spreadsheets stretched into the night, and I often found myself locking bathroom doors just to breathe. Panic attacks came without warning, tight chest, racing heart, the world closing in while I clutched the edge of a sink. Sundays became dread-filled vigils for the week ahead, my body revolting against the life I had been groomed to pursue. At 25, I broke. I typed my resignation letter, closed the door on that corner cubicle, and refused to step back into it. For the first time in my life, I made a choice that wasn't approved, vetted, or applauded. I accepted a job at a marina in Newport, Rhode Island, scrubbing decks and learning ropes instead of parsing market forecasts. The family's reaction was swift. Marcus sneered over dinner, calling it a quarter-life crisis. My mother fretted about how she could possibly explain me at the next charity gala. And my father, expression unreadable, dismissed it entirely. She's just playing with boats. She'll come back when reality sets in. But reality had already set in, just not the one they recognized. I found solace in salt air and wooden docks, in the rhythm of tides rather than the tick of stock tickers. For the first time, I wasn't suffocating. I didn't know then where that choice would lead, only that it felt like a lifeline. And once my hands gripped that rope, I wasn't letting go. The morning the message arrived, I was in my office overlooking Newport Harbor, reviewing charter contracts. The water outside glittered with movement sails unfurling, gulls sweeping low, and for a moment I felt steady, as if my life had finally found its own tide. Then my phone buzzed, and steadiness shattered. My mother's words appeared on the screen. The family has decided this year's cruise will be a celebration of success. Given your choices, we think it's best you sit this one out. This cruise is for successful families only. I read it 3 times, as if repetition would dull the sting. It didn't. A lump lodged in my throat, the same familiar ache I'd carried since childhood, the reminder that nothing I did outside their definition of success would ever count. I tried to swallow it down, but the bitterness clung. I didn't realize Taylor had stepped into my office until she placed a cup of coffee on my desk. "You look like someone just canceled Christmas," she said. "My family," I answered flatly. "They've uninvited me." "Apparently. I'm not successful enough." Taylor froze, then set her own mug down with deliberate care. "They don't know. Do they? They think I manage a marina. Maybe, if I've been lucky. I've worked my way up to shift supervisor." I almost laughed at how absurd it sounded, but the knot in my chest was too tight. Taylor leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "You're letting them write a story that isn't true. And now, fate's handed you the perfect ending. They've booked Azure Crest, your flagship yacht, without realizing it. Don't you see? This is your moment." Her words landed with a force I wasn't ready for. I had dreamed of recognition. Yes, but never in this way. I wanted their love unmeasured by bank accounts. I wanted them to see me for myself, not as an asset. To reveal everything now, wouldn't that just prove their point that only wealth makes someone worthy? But Taylor pressed on. "You've given them years to value you without it. They never have. Let them see who you really are." That night, I called Captain Miller. His voice, steady as the tide, carried through the line. When I explained the situation, he paused only briefly before saying, "Understood. Miss Alden, we'll prepare for your arrival. We arranged it carefully. My family would board first. I would come later, not as a guest, but as the owner. Enough time for them to settle. Enough time for them to believe their narrative before I stepped onto my own deck and rewrote it." The morning of the cruise was bright and sharp, the kind of day Newport Harbor seemed designed for. I arrived later than my family, deliberately giving them time to perform their grand entrance. From the parking lot, I could already see them on the dock, Marcus barking at dockhands about luggage placement as though he were in charge. My mother pausing at the gangway with her practiced smile angled toward imaginary cameras. My father striding with the easy entitlement of a man convinced the world existed to serve him. I waited until they had vanished up the polished teak steps of Azure Crest before walking down the pier. I had chosen my outfit carefully: white linen pants, a navy blouse, gold jewelry that whispered rather than shouted. I wanted authority, but not ostentation. The sea breeze lifted my hair as I approached the security officer stationed at the gangway. Before I could speak, my mother appeared at the rail, her expression tightening when she recognized me. She descended quickly, that social smile still fixed, but her eyes cold. "Serafina," she said under her breath, leaning close as though shielding me from view. "This cruise is for successful families only." I was very clear. Her words should have stung, but instead a steadiness settled in my chest. Before I could answer, Captain Miller emerged from the deck above, his tone measured but firm. "Miss Alden, welcome aboard. We weren't expecting you quite yet, but everything is prepared." The shift was immediate. My mother froze, her smile faltering, her perfectly manicured fingers tightening on the rail. My father appeared behind her, confusion creasing his face. Marcus stopped mid-sentence, turning toward us. I reached into my bag and pulled out the ring of keys that opened every lock aboard Azure Crest. The company's crest gleamed on the brass fob. I let them dangle for a moment before slipping the master key free. "Well," I said evenly, eyes on my mother's, "it's my yacht. So everyone stay." The boarding passes slid from her hand and fluttered onto the dock. My father's mouth opened, then closed again, his certainty unmoored. Marcus stared as if he had misheard. I stepped past them and onto the deck, the wood firm beneath my feet, as the balance of power shifted with the tide. That evening, the dining salon glowed under soft light, the mahogany table set with silver and crystal polished to perfection. Chef Marcel had prepared a spread worthy of royalty: lobster tails, seared scallops, platters of fresh fruit and breads still warm from the oven. The scent of butter and herbs lingered in the air as the family gathered, their voices low with unease after the shock of the afternoon. I let them sit first, deliberately arriving last. When I entered, all conversation stilled. I crossed the room without hesitation and took the seat at the head of the table. My father's brows lifted, his jaw tightening at the sight of me occupying the place he had assumed would be his. Eleanor broke the silence first. "Darling, you've outdone yourself," she said brightly, as though she had always known of my success. "This yacht, this meal, your taste is impeccable. We couldn't be prouder." Her pivot was smooth, her voice carrying for the benefit of anyone who might be listening, though the tightness around her mouth betrayed the scramble beneath. Marcus leaned forward, eager to regain ground. "Impressive operation you've got here. Sarah, but tell me, what's your growth plan? A boutique fleet is fine for now, but unless you scale aggressively, you'll be overtaken by larger firms." His tone carried the same smugness he once used to recount his bonuses. Camille, perched beside him in a silk dress, added with a soft laugh, "Oh, but Marcus, don't you think it's charming? Sarah has built something that feels personal, and honestly, it's so glamorous." I sipped my wine before answering. "We're expanding, but at a pace that protects quality. Luxury doesn't scale the way spreadsheets do. Marcus, our clients choose us because we aren't mass market." My father studied me, measuring, recalculating. His silence was more telling than words. I ate calmly, spoke when spoken to, never boasting, never yielding. For the first time, I wasn't the outsider tolerated at the table, I was the anchor around which the evening revolved. And as the plates were cleared, The ocean outside shifted, the wind carrying the promise of a storm. The second night began quietly enough, the sea dark but calm beneath a low-hanging moon. After dinner, I excused myself early, choosing fresh air on the upper deck over the forced pleasantries of coffee and dessert. The wind had sharpened, carrying a chill uncommon for summer in the Atlantic, and I felt the yacht shudder beneath my feet in a way I knew too well. By the time Captain Miller joined me, the first drops of rain had spattered the teak. "Systems moved in faster than forecast," he said. "Winds building, seas climbing. We'll need to adjust course." Within the hour, the storm was upon us. Waves slammed the hull with the force of a hammer, each impact sending a tremor through the vessel. 10-foot swells lifted Azure Crest like a toy before dropping her hard, and the dining salon erupted in panic. My mother stumbled in, silk shawl soaked, eyes wild. "This isn't normal," she shouted, gripping the wall. Richard, do something. My father, pale himself, could only cling to the rail as another wave struck. Marcus appeared next, his complexion the color of paper, jaw clenched against nausea. Camille, mascara running, clung to her husband's arm and whispered that we were going to die. I didn't waste breath on reassurance. I headed for the bridge, taking the stairs 2 at a time, rain lashing my face. The crew was already in motion, voices crisp over the storm. I stepped beside Captain Miller, scanning the radar. "Adjust 5 degrees east," I ordered. "We'll reach the cove by dawn if we hold this line. Stabilizers to maximum. Aye, Miss Alden." The first mate responded, moving to the controls. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the faces of my family clustered at the doorway, drawn by fear and curiosity. They watched as I spoke calmly with the crew, issued directions, and braced myself against each roll of the yacht. Not once did my voice rise above steady command. For years they had seen me as weak, frivolous, even laughable. Now, in the chaos of the storm, they saw something else: competence, authority, a steadiness they lacked. By the time the seas eased hours later, their silence was louder than the wind. And I knew the storm had done more than test the yacht. It had changed what could no longer be unseen. By morning, the seas had calmed, but the family was different. The storm had stripped away the polish they wore like armor. At breakfast, no one boasted or postured. Silence hung heavier than the night's thunder. It was my mother who spoke first, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it. "I've spent my whole life trying to keep control," she said, fingers tightening around her coffee cup. "Appearances, standing, reputation, all of it. And last night I realized none of that means a thing when the waves rise." She didn't look at me, but the admission itself was more than I expected. My father cleared his throat. "You handled yourself well, better than I could have predicted." The words were clipped, but they carried weight. He was acknowledging not just survival, but competence. Yet, even as he spoke, I saw the calculation in his eyes, the numbers, the scale of the business, the valuation he still couldn't stop measuring. Marcus leaned back, pale but steady. "I didn't know you knew all that. Navigation, systems, command. I thought you just managed." The grudging respect in his tone was as close to an apology as I'd ever get. Camille studied me openly, envy flickering in her gaze before softening into awe. "You looked like you belonged up there," she said. "Not like you were pretending, like the rest of us." It was Amanda, our cousin, who surprised me most. She was still in college, shadowing Marcus for the summer. "I've been miserable in my finance internship," she admitted. "But seeing you last night, I realized I want something that feels real, not just prestigious." Her eyes met mine with a kind of clarity that made my chest tighten. The cracks were there now, hairline fractures in the walls that had defined us. And for the first time, I wondered what might grow in the space they left behind. By the time we reached Nassau, the storm was already a memory. but its mark lingered in the way my family moved quieter, slower, stripped of the constant edge of competition. No one bragged about portfolios or corner offices. The air was subdued, as though each of them was still turning over what they had seen on the bridge. We gathered on the main deck for departure, the skyline rising behind us. My father stood beside me, his hands clasped behind his back. For a long moment he said nothing, then asked, "Same time next year." The words carried more weight than their simplicity suggested, an opening I hadn't expected. "Yes," I answered, meeting his gaze steadily. "But this time, everyone gets a proper invitation." His eyes flickered in acknowledgement, and for once, he didn't argue. As they disembarked one by one, I stayed behind, letting the silence of the yacht settle around me. My mother offered a careful smile, Marcus a stiff nod, Camille a look tinged with curiosity rather than scorn. Even Amanda paused to squeeze my hand, her eyes bright with something like hope. When the dock was clear, I walked to the bow. The sea was calm, the horizon awash in sunrise gold. I breathed in the salt air and let it fill me, steady and sure. For years, I had carried the weight of their disapproval like an anchor, measuring myself against their yardsticks and finding myself lacking. But here, with the sun climbing over Azure Crest, I understood what I had built. Success was never about their validation. It was about living in alignment with myself, unshaken by their definitions. And at last, I felt the peace of no longer needing to prove a thing,